Hey everyone, welcome once again to Grieving While Black number 5. We are joined once again by Mr. Miles uh, and Miss Anissa Moore. I'm Ryan Moore, and I'm glad that you're part of this discussion and conversation. So today, our topic is, and this is just really just like off the cuff conversation.
Love it.
um, what happens now as the Black community post Trump, right? What do we do now post Trump? Because we went to the voting booth, right? We have a new president, okay, but certain things have stayed the same, right? And so, like for example, even post Trump now, our country's immigration system is still grossly unfair, right? Our economy is overwhelmingly benefiting the wealthy. Our healthcare system continues to cripple those who can least afford it. We're still responsible for conflict, war, and unrest at home and abroad. The death penalty still exists, and it's primarily doesn't favor people of color. Law enforcement still will be institutionally prejudiced against people of color. And so, with all these things going, we got to ask the question: what then do we do?
Well, I'm
What
so
are we,
glad we're having this conversation.
what are we asking? What
And I
do we
think this is the conversation, Pastor Moore, that we should have had before we thought about symbolism as it relates to the White House and the presidency. And what we mean by this is we have to look at creating and sustaining a Black agenda, right? And that's what's really missing from all of this, is creating a Black agenda. And what we mean by that also is, just to create a framework here by which we can have this conversation, is that, look, Cornell West, one of my favorites, he said, look, anytime you talk about Black people in the United States and America, you're talking about a state of emergency for Black poor, for working class people. You're making it a priority to say, America, keep track of the prison industrial complex, keep track of dilapidated housing, keep track of the disgraceful school systems, keep track of the unemployment rates and the underemployment rates, as well as the unavailable health care. And that's how we can begin this conversation, to talk about how a Black agenda has to address the issues that are critical to our economic as well as social growth for our communities. So what we have right now is we have symbolism, right? But symbolism is not the answer to rebuilding our communities. And I know that Minister Miles is going to jump in, but I wanted to just like set the match. I had to light the match a little bit. Sisters on Fire, light the match, which is why today I have my Black Panther in the back. You got to light the match today to say this is the conversation.
I must say, y'all are ultra Black today.
Yes, Nas all day.
Yeah.
So happy that he won that. He's included now in the Library of Congress for his album Illmatic. And we know that for many of us, Illmatic just changed the game.
15 to 20 years, I think it's been in the making, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Uh,
Something
well,
like
I agree with Professor Moore. Professor Moore, the Black agenda, which keeps recurring. So what we need to also focus on is the history, and making sure every population learns our history, because we seem to be in this unfettered cycle of repetition. We're on the hamster wheel. We go around and then we come back to the 50s. We go around and we come back to the 60s. We go around, we come back to the 40s. We go around and we come back to the 30s. We've been working on this for hundreds of years. It's just that it's not in our collective memory. So we got to teach the Black agenda. And we have one. We have a huge one. They had a thing called the Black Census Project. For those of you who are unaware of that, you can Google that. But there is a blacktothefuture.org where they have up the Black agenda, of course, which deals with, what are we always talking about? The economy, our society, our democracy, our communities, our families, the legal system, policing. All of those things have been addressed by our ancestors, by our forefathers, by the elders, and we need to get it into collective memory.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that symbolism for a minute, though. Share with me, what you thought about when the transition took place, of more where you saw maybe social media feeds, you saw Black, culture feeds, Twitter feeds, and things that sort. It was more of the symbolism than it was a plan for progression. So let's talk to that a little bit. What do you think about that?
Well, they threw up a lot of icons, right? They took down the old iconography, a lot of the old speech. We had new poets, but still saying the same message. We had artists singing some of the old messages, some of the new messages. We're rising, we're doing all of these things. And it was a very ambitious, a very beautiful symbolic movement, as is the movement when they were talking about removing statues and names of buildings and these things. And I kept on saying to myself, this is really cute.
Yeah.
But this doesn't effectuate the change. You're going to have to do more than make a symbol. You're going to have to actually do the work. And that's the hard part. So the symbolism, the iconography is very easy to give us a bite, a moment, a tweet, a something that's good for social media, a good 30 to 60 seconds of, ooh, that sounded real good. But when we looked at policy after the inauguration, I said, oh, well, yeah, he's a worker. He gets work done. They get work done. But what's the difference between this administration and the Obama administration? What is going to be the thing? Because we're now looking at progressivism and how do we progress towards a mutually inclusive America? And I think we've got a lot of work to do. The symbols may not hold up to the standard of time or the test of history based on what we've read and what we know.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, everyone was saying, wow, feels so good. And it was a great feel-good moment, but we know that those moments become short-lived, because when it's time to roll your sleeves up and address the issues as it relates to privilege, right? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about some people have privileges and some people don't. Then it doesn't feel good anymore. Then all of the people who were posting and going crazy on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, they're not posting anymore. They're not posting anymore because now it's down to the real work. How are you going to change policies? And people, obviously the Black community is divided on the role of President Obama, his 2 terms. They're divided about, was it successful, was it not successful? But the point was, how can you place that burden on the president when that is not his legal or judicial role, right? That comes from the local level, that comes from your state level, that comes from your federal level in terms of your representation. So we have to say, in the end, this is a heart issue. In the end, this is a heart issue. How are we going to shift the minds, to shift the culture, to shift the laws? Because we can put all the laws on the book that we want. We've been doing that forever, right? And we can even go back to 1964, 1965, but that whole Civil Rights Act has been dismantled since then because of people's hearts. and because of people's minds. So that's the work that we still have to do. That comes from education, that comes from having conversations like this, but that ultimately comes from those people who have privilege have to stop and recognize, wait, I have had privilege that other people have not had in this country.
That's right.
It's okay to feel guilty about it, but your guilt is still not going to help me to stop from being stopped by the police.
That's right.
See, so let's be clear about that.
That's right.
Guilt is not going to help me when I'm walking through a department store for the security guards to come follow me. Right? So we need to go beyond just feeling guilt about privilege. How are you going to stand with us and partner and ally with us to make this change? Mm-hmm. And then finally, we need the allies, but you still need to empower us to speak about our issues. You can't speak for me because you haven't experienced what I've experienced, which means you need to give me the respect to speak about my own truth, but stand with me and say, I don't understand this because I've never experienced it, but I know that it's wrong. And I know that I need to take a stand with these people, whoever these people are, us, any people of color. I need to stand so that this can stop. And that's what I have not seen yet. I've seen a lot of symbolism, putting up pictures. I've seen oodles of pictures of our vice president. That's wonderful. But in the end, are you going to be willing to take a stand to call out the oppression that's taking place across this country? And I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, this is really good. I want to say this. It's another, thing that I want to pose here. Because you talked about a heart issue. And traditionally speaking in America, when we talk about the heart issue, we bring in religion, we bring in faith. All right. So how can the church play an instrumental role in this area, right? And I say that because most of the time when you talk about the heart issue, we hear people say we need to continue to preach the gospel. And I always say the gospel is not, the gospel is being preached in America. We have some of the greatest gospel scholarship there is. This morning before getting on this Zoomcast, I was listening to some scholarship teaching, but it doesn't necessarily play out in our everyday society, right? How do we bring about change in our society? How do we apply the scriptures, in small things, right? Just in small things. Like I told someone the other day, the message for me of the day was more mercy in my life, less of me, more of you. But then how does that display when I'm driving on I-78 and trying to get on and merge? It says, I'm gonna let some people in. And maybe they needed to get let in because nobody else was letting them in. Although I had the right to keep going, I'm letting you in, right? And so it just says that when it comes to, that's just a portion of it, but it says that when you look at some of the things that have taken place, where if you're in privilege and you have voter suppression laws in your state, and you're saying, let's just preach the gospel, those brothers and sisters 10 miles from me they're brothers and sisters. They're Christians. And I'm saying, I'm okay with them not being able to vote. And
say that, say it.
Go on, preach.
Preach it.
That's an issue. And these same people will be in church on Sunday, listening to scholarship Bible teaching. There's a disconnect here. You can't say, I'm praying about it. Pray about it. I can't vote now. That's an issue. So what can the church do? And I'm trying to get not just the Black church, church, because when Jesus comes back for us, he's coming back for the church, period. I know we have our issues here on earth, but He's coming back for a church. What role can the church play in bringing about some of the change that has taken place, that has gone down?
Well, part of the issue, the heart issue for me in the church and everybody in it, is that a lot of people are in the church, but the church is not in a lot of people.
Oh boy.
Oh, that's good.
So there's a disconnect, right? They're full on Sundays, or maybe they're not, and the people are coming to hear what we were talking about with the symbolism, that they want that feel good moment, right? But if the joy of the Lord is our strength, you must have it with you always, not just on Sunday. So you have to, what they say, be the change. So if we're going to talk about preaching the gospel, it can't just be something that comes out of your mouth, because it's a heart issue. It can't be just an intellect thing that comes from your brain and what you've studied, because it's a heart issue. This is something you have to walk and live,
Right.
and be the example. Being the salt and the light, especially the light, is the example, right? So the example is Jesus. His ministry that we are to continue was to deal with the issues of the poor and poverty.
Mhm.
That's not on the most churches' agendas.
No.
To feed the hungry. That is also not on most churches' agendas. To put clothes and supply and meet the needs of those who have needs. To take care of the widows. To take care of the youth and the children. And to instruct them. And to also be in tandem with our elders, because we don't have all the answers. We haven't lived as long a life as certain other people. We don't know this is the cycles on repeat. We don't know that because this is our first experience. Talk to those elders who are in the faith, right? Get their perspective on some of these issues. Certain things we don't even have to deal with. We want to deal with sin. Well, God's already dealt with sin. That's not our job. So we don't have to deal with sin. We don't have to judge it. We have to maintain being salt and light and having those fruits of the spirit. So like you said, when you jump on 95, when you jump on the Meadowbrook Parkway, where is your love? Where is your patience? Where is your long suffering? Where is your gentleness, your humility? You have to exhibit this in your everyday walk first as an example that you even follow Christ, because that's how we recognize one another. And if the church is going to carry out their job, they must be diligent in the task of expressing through example, through servitude, that first.
That's good. That's good. He really covered everything I was going to say. So I'll just try to say it in 2 sentences. There's a difference between being self-righteous and being righteous. And a lot of what's going on in the church is people have, because they attend church, they become self-righteous. And when you become self-righteous, your focus now is not on practicing the teachings of Jesus, but it's about saying I'm better than others. I'm using myself as a standard. And when we look at the life of Jesus, he was with the least of these, right? There was compassion because he was always around the poor. He was around what we would call today the street people. He was around the everyday people who were fishermen. He was also around the people of ill repute. He was around the prostitutes, the people who were involved in trafficking, today what we would call trafficking. Those are the people that he was with. Who did he challenge? He challenged the religious people, right? To say, if you can't love the least of these, then you're not really loving God.
Ooh.
You're not really doing the business that God has called us to do. And so there is a disconnect, and it's that disconnect that's keeping people from embracing the kingdom of God. because people are looking to see the love of God in a world that's filled with hurt and pain. But to see people who are without love, now they've missed the first lesson. they've missed the first lesson, and that's what's going on, and that's why the church will have to be the catalyst to transform our world. They have to, at some point, call out the darkness, call out the hypocrisy, call out the lack of love, call out what? The injustice.
Amen. How can you love God, who you've never even seen, except through the example of man? And you can't love the people right next to you, in your neighborhood, in your town, in your city, in your job.
Oh boy.
No, I feel something coming on. I'm gonna say, look, don't forget the story of the Good Samaritan.
Okay.
When your brothers can't vote down the street,
Right.
you driving by real quick because you're on your way to church this Sunday.
That's right.
Address the real issues. Address the real issues.
Address the issue.
Now, you said something also that I want to talk on briefly, is the institution. I think the institution of the church, right? Because you said, we should be loving our neighbor, we should feed our poor, we should talk to the homeless, you name it, right? And we say this is not on the agenda of the church, and we kind of look at the church as this, this institution, organization, but the church is made up of people. And so when I hear you say, we should be about the poor and feeding the hungry and helping the children and the widows, that becomes a very individual thing that becomes corporate, right? So I look at that and say, because a lot of times people say the church needs to do something about that, but you, the church, like, what can you do in your, oikos, as we say, your community, to affect change? I always say, hey, everyone's a huge advocate on social media, but what are you actually doing, right? In real time? Are you spending 1 hour, with those who are in your community who may need tutoring, right? Are you giving money towards some of these unjust causes that are taking place, right? There's a lot of things we can do that we don't necessarily have to put on the institution and wait for, the senior pastor, the elder board, and the deacons to say, we're behind this. I could do that myself. And I think as Christians, we need to put that in our own hands. We see something that's unjust, we need to say, no, Jesus would be about this, I'm doing it, right? We should be about, hey, there's kids that can't get a meal today. What can I do to help fund that? What can I do to support that? Hey, can I get some other brothers and sisters to donate meals? I mean, there's something that we can do. That it doesn't always have to be this big institutional big event. It could be something really small that you're doing that's having an impact right where you are, right? I think we need to get back to that, because we kind of look at all these big issues and go, it's the church's issue. It's the church. When the church does something, that means your local fellowship might not get around to it. What are you doing to affect it, right? And I think there's a lot of things that I think in our society today, we also have to, that's another GWB that we talk about is just, there's a lot of things we put on the church to address. And really, what can we really do is the issue, right? Because we can address things very simply. We could put up statements and it's been addressed. But what are we doing is more effective than just, I addressed it. Now let's move on, right? Yeah, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, what you're saying is whether it be the institution or the person, we have to be intentional.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think that's it, period. We have to be intentional. It's either you're about this or you're not. At a certain point in our lives, we have to make a decision. If I see something that's wrong, am I standing with the thing that's wrong because I'm afraid? Or am I going to just take that courage and take that step to say, this is wrong? How can I be an agent of change? So we need to be intentional, but we cannot be intentional unless, and this goes back to the heart, you have to see your neighbor before you can bless your neighbor, before you can minister to your neighbor. And that's the key step, right? Because everywhere throughout the Bible, wherever Jesus was, where there was a need, there's always a line saying he saw that person. Then he had what? Then he had compassion, and then he ministered. So that means that's the first step. We have to see. But people don't want to see, because if I see the person and they have a need, that makes me what? That makes me responsible.
Uh-oh.
And that's where everything goes to, oh, wow. Oh, it's a shame, so-and-so. I'm going to pray for them. Or let the church do it. Because the responsibility says, I have to invest in this person. I have to take the time to call that person. But I want to watch my favorite show that I've been binging all week.
Ooh.
So maybe, you know what, let the church do it, because I've been working hard all week. I need to watch my show, right? That means that when the person calls me back and it's an inconvenient time, then what? Do I just reject the call? Because it's about us being intentional. So most people see, some people see, but they choose not to see because there's responsibility with it. And then there's other people who so wrapped up in their own, they don't see the people around them. So that's the first step. Be intentional. In order for you to be intentional, you have to see. You have to see your neighbor, and then you can begin to act. You can begin to meet the needs in your community. Don't wait for your leader to do it. You put too much of the burden on the leader, right? But the only responsibility of the leader is to teach the people to be intentional. And everything that flows from that church, it should be intentional. Outreach should be intentional. That everything you do in some way is connected to the outreach, right? And like you said, we'll have another one, because there's a whole other piece to that. And that is, when it's time to invite people in, we only want certain people. We don't want everybody. We want people that we feel they can kind of fit in. I can do this, and this is okay. But you don't want the people to come in.
So that's a lot of time, energy, disappointment, heartache.
Well, it's the heart issue again. Everything keeps coming back to that heart issue. If the church is not in you, you are not going to do the work of Christ.
No.
It's not present in your mind. It's not a part. We have the African proverb, each one teach one, right? So yes, we don't put it on the leadership. The leadership's job is to teach and instruct. If they're giving us evangelism and we don't have running in our feet to go out and speak to the lame, or we don't even see the lame. I've been in conversations on the sidewalk where somebody's walking by, and I make it a point, and I know people get annoyed with me with it, to speak to the people that are in my area, who come into my surrounding, my bubble, so to speak. So I don't have to know you. Walk right by me. I'm going to say hello. And then somebody, when we're talking, they're looking at like, who is that? I'm like, I don't know. I said hi, you know. Well, why are you speaking to them? We having a conversation. People used to get mad at me but you don't know who's just not being recognized. That's one piece of ministry right there. We just acknowledge someone who may not have been spoken to all day.
That's right. That's right.
That's all it took was, oh, that brother saw me. He's in front of that church. Maybe now I might have to stop in there just to say hello back. Maybe. But like she said, the personal responsibility piece, people don't want to invest in their time, their money into endeavors that they don't feel benefit them. This is the argument with environmentalists. They're like, dude, you're tearing up the planet. We live here. They're like, I'm making money. It benefits me, but you're killing everybody else. We have to take responsibility for the thing that we've been entrusted to do. And we've been entrusted to do it. And there's no way, no easy, quick fix, but there's also no way out of it. Like it's going to come back to you at some point, whether you become the person that needs something and is waiting on someone to respond to your need. It's coming back around.
Yeah. You know, I think, you know, I want to kind of wrap up now. We got about 8 minutes on the clock. And my next question is this. Since we now have a new administration, you know, Biden, Harris, what do we as a community, as the Black community, demand of them? How do we keep Biden, Harris accountable? I say that in love, right? Because we all need accountability. If you're a leader, you need accountability. But how do we keep this administration accountable that 4 years goes by and then once again, we may be faced with the same policies being reversed by another worker of, you know, the policies that we've seen the last 4 years. And then we got to do it all over again. And we understand that the suppression laws are even thicker this time around. So what do we demand of this new administration going forward? And we got 7 minutes on the clock.
Well, mine is quick. We can start with Representative Park Cannon, who was arrested for trying to protect the vote and the rights of the people. You aren't in that state supposed to arrest people and she's a legislator. So when they're in session and she's a part of that legislating body and she knocks on a door and she gets arrested because they're passing laws behind backs of other legislators and they decide, let's arrest her. And I'm like, where was that energy on January 6th? You hold them accountable by making the phone calls. Get you a 5 calls app or whatever you got to do. Get your email up and running, look in your state for who's in charge from the top of your state to the bottom, and then disseminate some information, find out what is not being taken care of and submit that information. Be vocal in your local civic engagement, in your local civic association, and your local church body. This is a problem in my neighborhood, Pastor, because you can then have them now be held accountable. How do we deal with this? Because they just, they started tearing up my street. They started beating up the kids the other day. They started locking the parks and the playgrounds. They started taking the books from you have to make your school board accountable. You have to speak on the issue, speak truth to power of the issue. That's all I'm gonna say.
That's good.
Well, I mean, you covered it all. Get involved locally. That's how you hold them accountable. You should know who your legislators are in your area. You should know who your Congress people are in your area. Start making those phone calls, use social media, form petitions, right? But get the information out. But we must continue to press. And the fact that we do have a new administration means that we shouldn't be sleeping now. We shouldn't be saying, okay, it's over. It's not over. We're supposed to be really fighting right now for all the things that we need. So we cannot sleep now. This is the time for us to continue to work.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And I would say this, let's do more grassroots stuff.
Yes.
Meaning that, you know, someone told me this about 6 years ago, and they said, you know, Ryan, you're doing a lot of things in the community. And they said, won't you run? Someone said, you should run for mayor. Mayor of the city was up at that time. And the person told me, he says, you know what? No, you shouldn't, because you could get more done without that title than if you had it. And so I say, let's do more grassroots stuff. What's the needs in your community? Can you spend 1 hour, maybe even a month, making a difference in that area? Can you go on social media instead of, you know, showing, you know, your best life, which is not really true? Won't you actually do some stuff where it's actually making a benefit in someone's life, in the sense of, hey, let's fund this. This will affect 20 kids getting books in the school. That's a whole class, right? Hey, there's kids in Trenton, New Jersey who needs a printer. Let's buy a printer for them so they can see math charts in color. You know, let's do stuff like that. Because you know what? At the end of the day, I could do that. I don't have to wait for Biden or Harris to pass a bill or to Booker, and I love all of them. But the bottom line is, and that's not just because they're Democrats, but we could do something. right? So do it. That's all I'm saying.
And that is the Black agenda.
That's the
Black
agenda.
agenda is for the community to rise up and
Yes.
do what we can do for ourselves, by ourselves, and then it will go all the way up. That's why we need Black businesses. That's why we need Black educators. That's why we need all of these things within our own community. We can take care of certain things we can do ourselves. We can put our own people into political power so that we can see the changes in our community.
Absolutely.
You better, y'all are preaching today. One last thing is,
It's
in
been a
the
while
church
since-
aspect, let's bring it to the church again. On my Facebook page, I usually speak about things that you can do individually and to accomplish things. Remember that thing called the Holy Ghost handshake? You know so-and-so needed a coat. You know they needed some sneakers. You know that they didn't eat that choice meal yesterday. Even if it's just 10, 20 bucks, you can just shake. Good to see you today, brother. Just shake right in their hand that nice little blessing and keep it moving. You ain't got to tell nobody about it. You ain't got to post about it. You ain't got to, you just did the deed.
That's
You paid it forward, as Oprah likes to call it.
That's right. And God's economy is always good.
Always.
Oh, all right.
We're going to end on that note. It's been a pleasure once again to do Grieving While Black with you. I look forward to next month for Grieving While Black number 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to go to another level with that one. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful day.
You do the same. God bless.
God bless.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.